Hi everyone and welcome to the Jeff Buller Show. Today I want to introduce our guest, Alexandra Watkins. Now, Alexandra Watkins is the Chief Executive and Boss Lady and outrageously outspoken founder of Eat My Words, the only branding firm on the planet that specializes in creating brand names that make people smile instead of scratch their heads. So she has clients including Amazon, Google, Twitter, Disney, Coca-Cola, and Colgate. They've tapped her to actually come up with creative and engaging names that move people and move products. A personal name hall of fame includes the Wendy Baconator, Neato robotic vacuum, Burgers King's Mac and Cheetos, Spanish language school Gringo Lingo, and frozen yogurt franchise called, and this is one I really love, Spoon Me. So thanks, Alexandra. Great to have you on the show. And I just actually want to finish up because I didn't quite finish that. She's had a breakthrough book, which I helped launch a few years ago. And it is called Hello, My Name is Awesome, How to Create Brand Names That Suck. It was named a top 10 marketing book by Inc. magazine. It was on only 3 books shortlisted for the 2019 Outstanding Works of Literature OWL Award in the Crowded Sales and Marketing category. She's a former NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center Author in residence. Currently, she is author in residence in her San Diego pool house. Welcome to the show, Alexandra. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice to see you.
So, I met you originally when your PR agency reached out to me. It must be, when did you publish? 6 years ago? Is that right?
6 years ago, yeah.
Okay. So I had this PR agency reach out to me and said, I've got this great author. She's launching a book. You might be a great fit to help her. So consequently, we helped her launch her book, which is titled, as I mentioned before, Hello, My Name is Awesome. Now, this is the old edition. Just want to make sure you know that. But it's a great book. I actually read it from cover to cover. It doesn't take long, 2 or 3 hours, and it gives you a great insight into how to name your company and make it memorable and fun. And that's what she does. So, Alexandra, how did you get into this naming business? Because there's not many naming companies on the planet that I'm aware of.
There is not. And it really was my dream job to become a namer. Really, if somebody's going to pay me to sit around and dream up names, I didn't know it was a profession. And so I started my career as an advertising copywriter. And every once in a while, I would get thrown a bone and get to name something, and I loved it. But like I said, I didn't know it was a profession. So when I finally figured that out 15 years later, I switched gears and said, I'm going to be a namer. I'm just going to name things. And people said, you can't just name things. And I said, yes, I can. And look, now I have a book and made a name for myself.
Okay. So, and before that, what were you doing? So you're from New York. So
no, I'm from San Diego.
Oh, you're originally from San Diego, but you lived in New York.
Yeah, I grew up here.
Okay. So you grew up in San Diego and you've really just come back home because, so you did spend some time in New York, didn't you? So
no,
you didn't.
Okay. No, no, my sister lives in New York. There's nothing about me that I feel is very New Yorkish, other than I probably talk too fast. I grew up in San Diego. I left when I was 21 and I moved away for 33 years and spent the last 22 in San Francisco, where I, of course, saw you a number of times. San Francisco got, it changed. And so I wanted to move back to my hometown, be by the beach. And so a couple of years ago, I moved back here, and here I am.
So welcome home to San Diego. It's a beautiful city. I've been there a few times, I think with social media marketing world, and it's a great city. It's a harbour city, a lot like Sydney. So I find it, and also a lot great beaches, and the weather's, because it's further south, US, the weather tends to be very good. So I really enjoyed my trips to San Diego. So maybe we need to leap in and go. So you started this naming business. Okay. So what was your first client? What was that like?
Oh my gosh, no one's ever asked me that question. Oh no, I know what my first client was. It was before I started Eat My Words, which is the name of my company now, as you know, Eat My Words. It was the Gap, and the Gap was launching a line of beauty products. And someone I knew that I wanted to be a namer, and she had seen some, probably little things I'd done, and said, can you come work for us for 6 weeks naming things? And oh my gosh, I was in heaven. I was so excited to be doing that. So, and I worked on the Embarcadero down in San Francisco, and I had a beautiful office overlooking the water. I just fell in love with being a namer and doing all that. So I named, one of my favorite names I did for the beauty products was a travel makeup kit. And I named it Dash, like you're dashing out the door. And the tagline I did was, a little color goes a long way.
All right. I like that already. So
Thank you. Yeah. Dash of color, dashing out the door.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was I would say that was one of my first names.
Okay. So is that product still in use today or not?
Oh, well, in retail, that stuff goes in and out. But I also had named a startup years ago, probably over 15 years ago. And it was a charity rewards customer relationship management product. And I named it Angel Points because it was all about employees doing good things. And I thought, oh, it's kind of like getting brownie points. So we get angel points when you did good things. And I named it Angel Points. And the tagline was, the value of good deeds. And they are still around by way of, they were sold to another company, but it is still around.
Right. Okay.
A lot of things I've named have been around, like Smitten Ice Cream in San Francisco. They probably have, 7 locations. They've been around over 10 years. As you know, my most notorious name is the name of a nail salon that I named Hand Job. And Hand Job's been around over a dozen years, and they have 2 locations.
Right. Okay. And where are they based? In San Francisco?
They're in San Francisco, yeah. Well,
okay.
Of course. I don't think they could be based anywhere else.
Yeah, San Francisco's got quite a bohemian culture, which I love. So, naming becoming your dream job. So, can you go a little bit more into detail about how? Like that wouldn't have crossed my mind. So why would you go naming my dream job? Is that because you love words? Where did the inspiration come to go, this is obviously why you're on the planet, is actually to do naming for brands and companies and products. So where did the inspiration?
Yeah, I was lucky. When I was in 8th grade, I realized I wanted to be in advertising. So much to my parents' chagrin, I skipped college and I talked myself into working in advertising, work for Ogilvy and Mather. I know they're all over the world. I met some people from the Sydney Ogilvy and Mather. Now they're just Ogilvy. But every once in a while, like I said, when I would work in advertising, every once in a while I would get thrown a bone and get to name something. So if we were working on a car account, for instance, like, the client needs a name for this new car, and it was never handled like it was a big deal. It was like, yeah, if you have any extra time. And like, I was so into it. And I remember doing it for a mountain bike company. It wasn't even a real company. It was just for like an ad. And for the ad, it needed they were doing like a fake company that needed a name. And like, I spent more time coming up with names than I did actually coming up with headlines for the ad. So I just knew I loved it. And that's how you can tell what your passion is. I always tell people, think about days at work that you've been the most happy. What were you working on?
Yeah. Yeah, the term I love to use, do what feeds your soul. And it's especially important in the current situation, and because it's a bit tough at the moment with the whole pandemic. So you started naming. You like time's obviously just flying for you. So you were working for advertising. What was the next step after that?
Well, after I discovered naming was a profession. Well, I quit during the .com boom. So this was in San Francisco. .com boom was going strong. And I was working, writing websites at the time as a copywriter. And then I do that for 6 weeks, and then I go traveling for a couple of weeks in Europe or somewhere and then come back. So back and forth. So I rode that .com gravy train until it crashed in my backyard. Then I went traveling for a year. I was in Australia for almost a whole year. So I just went traveling around. And when I came back, that's when I realized I didn't want to write websites anymore. I wanted to do what I really loved. And so that's how I started to get into naming. I started Eat My Words because I was doing a lot of food and beverage copywriting. And so that's started there, and then kind of got into naming. And then my friend said, hey, if you can name potato chips, you can name microchips. So then I just started naming everything, and I kept the name Eat My Words. But a couple kind of milestones happened. One is, so I started out, I didn't start by having a naming firm. You can't just start there. So I was doing copywriting and getting into naming, and I started freelancing for all of these big naming and branding firms like Landor, Interbrand. And one of the ones that I worked for, they're really nice people. They gave me a lot of work, and their name was Strategic Name Development. And they gave me an assignment to name a new bacon cheeseburger for Wendy's. And I came up with the name, the Baconator. Since that time, the Baconator has sold probably over 100 million. And I'm not exaggerating. Just in the first few weeks, it sold over 25 million. So yeah, easily, probably $1 billion. And so that name, I never used to say it, right? Because that, I was work for hire, but now when I say it, I give them credit, great agency, highly recommend them, all that. But that was pretty pivotal because I wasn't allowed to take credit for it. So that's when I was like, I really need to go get my own clients. Mm-hmm. So even though I had freelance clients, and also what I realized working for companies like Landor and Interbrand, they're in some of those big kind of corporate-y type of naming firms, they were employing people that were from academia. They were very left brain, mm-hmm. and I'm very right brain. And I'm sorry, creative people are right brain. And why would you want to hire left brain people for a creative project? That made no sense to me. So my names were based on concepts, just like in advertising. My headlines had to make emotional connections. That's what I did with my names, because to me, a name is like a little headline. Like we named a GPS for dogs retriever, right? Like people get that, right? And so they get it. It makes people smile. And that's why my names are all about making people smile instead of scratch their head. And so it's not based on Latin and linguistics. It's just a fun name that people get, or like oh gosh, I'm trying to think of so many favorite names. You mentioned Spoon Me, but some that I love are, we did this was a data analytics company. Hello, could you be any more boring than data analytics? Seriously, like yeah. You can find something more boring than data analytics?
Good luck.
Because I can't.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. I have to pour over the data every week with my team, and it sort of makes me slightly weep because it is boring, but it's important in this digital age to go over data analytics.
Yeah, so, of course. Well, I have some tech bros that work for me. So one of them, Darth Namer, he naming is his side hustle for us. He has a day job as an engineer for a very famous software company that I can't mention. But I put him on it because whenever we work with clients, I try to put people on the project that actually know their business or have a real interest in it or are in the target audience. So Darth Namer was working on data analytics. He's like, look, data, it's all about looking for patterns. And what are names of patterns, right? And he came up with Argyle, which is a very masculine pattern, and people in the client's target audience were mainly men. And so masculine pattern, and it's a diamond pattern. And we said Argyle Data, and it was all about finding diamonds in the data, because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the diamonds.
Yes. Okay.
So that's a name that I'm really proud of.
Okay. So now the thing for you is, can you walk me through the process a little bit here in terms of where do you start? Just like, and this is the thing too with a lot of companies, they, and even small business, they want to start and they agonize over the name, don't they? They're going, oh, I can't get that. And this is the other thing that becomes a challenge too, is a lot of the good names, well, supposedly good names, are taken on, in the domain name area. So what's the process for you in doing a name? Can you just give us a bit of a high level view of how you go about the process with a client in doing a name? Because it's not just random. You have and the book actually reveals that quite well. So could you give us a sort of a quick step through of how that works?
Sure. I should start by saying though that people always start in the wrong place, which is on GoDaddy looking for a domain name. Nothing wrong with GoDaddy. I love GoDaddy, but you do not want to look for a domain name first. And it's funny, I'm doing this online course, and for the domain names module, I show a skeleton at a computer because that's how long people spend looking for an available domain name. Don't even think about the domain name. You want to think about what you want, a good name, you want a good concept, then worry about the domain name. And I'm just going to give your listeners some examples to set their mind at ease, because people aren't familiar with these. And once they hear them, they're like, oh, okay. For the first 13 years they were in business, Tesla did not own Tesla.com. If you had gone to Tesla.com, you would have been greeted by a very ominous looking website that said, this site is owned by GandhiNet. Now, what would you do? Let's say you were in the market for a Tesla. Would you give up? No. What would you do? What would you do? You just go to Google or type in your browser, Tesla cars, right? Test drive a Tesla. And boom, you'd see it. There's a link. Boom, you're there. Have you even noticed what the domain name is? No. Do you not trust this company because they don't own Tesla.com? No. Do you not want to buy a car, give them money? Because no, you don't care, right? So for the first 13 years, Tesla was at teslamotors.com.
Yep, okay.
Now, Facebook until 2005 was thefacebook.com. Dropbox had millions of users before they got Dropbox, and they were getdropbox.com. A lot of us remember that. Basecamp, same thing, millions of users, lots of traction as Basecamp HQ. So, Square is Square Up. So a lot of companies don't get roadblocked. They find a great name like Tesla. I've always loved that name. I came up with that name for an electric company a long time before I'd ever heard of the car company. And Nikolai Tesla, the inventor, like it's such a cool name, but they didn't get hung up, right? And Elon Musk didn't start Tesla. So that's why when I say they, I don't mean Elon Musk. I mean whoever started Tesla. But Mark Zuckerberg didn't get hung up because it was the Facebook, and he had wanted it to call it Facebook. So don't get hung up. There are lots of workarounds, and I think for your audience, it's important to know what those are. Add a modifier word. So like get Tesla, Tesla Motor, or get Dropbox, Tesla Motors. But be creative. There is in San Francisco, there's a luxury apartment building. It's called Lumina. And it's dazzling towers, gleaming, like, super high end. And I was walking by one day and I saw this billboard outside, and it showed the interior of one of the model units. And it said, life at lumina.com. I was like, ooh, life at Lumina, that sounds good, right? So look at what they just did. They extended their brand by creating this really alluring domain name that makes a super strong emotional connection. Another thing you can do, another one that I love is there's a peanut butter company called Peanut Butter & Co. And you can go to peanutbutterandco.com, but it will redirect to their other domain name, which is unforgettable, people like me that are nuts about peanut butter, which is ilovepeanutbutter.com.
Right.
So if you can't get a domain that you want, be creative. And one that I absolutely love, there is a smoked turkey company called Greenberg Smoked Turkeys. And there's nothing particularly exciting about the name, not really memorable. Greenberg could be spelled 2 different ways, but their domain name is unforgettable. Okay, I want everybody to listen because you will never forget this. Greenberg Smoked Turkeys is at gobblegobble.com.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so that's what you can do. And look, if you are like, if you have, I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to you, and you're a big speaker, and you probably have speakers that listen to you. There's a speaker that I know named Patrick, and I cannot for the life of me say his last name. It's probably it's a mile long. It's lots of consonants. I don't know how to say it. And so he has that as a domain name, but for meeting planners and the people he meets, so like see him speak, like, oh, how can I get you to come speak at our event? He says, go to bookpatrick.com. Book Patrick, it's so easy, right? And it's a call to action.
Yep.
So if you can have a domain name that's a call to action, that's also very good.
I do like that. That's very, very good. It's very simple. And the fact you're actually including a call to action in a domain name, all advertising and digital marketing people will be salivating on that. That's for sure. So now you've come across some real issues, fun mistakes by people with names. So can you tell me a little bit about that? You've used some examples. It's very hard to maybe show it because we're not really showing it here because we're actually just doing a live podcast. But what are some of the names that were absolutely hilarious mistakes have been made?
Oh, you mean, well, I know like names that I can say like that people made bad choices.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Okay. Oh, wait. I know what you're talking about. Okay, hilarious mistakes. So do you mean where somebody named, unfortunately, they're all like infectious, it's my infectious disease part of my book that, like there's a company that called itself SARS, like that clearly it's like a software company, and it clearly didn't do diligence and Google the acronym SARS to see like, oh, it was a horrible infectious disease that killed lots of people. Then there's Whole Foods, which is a big grocery store here. It's owned by Amazon. It's very, Whole Foods, just like it sounds. They partner with different local restaurants to, be part of the community. And they partnered with one in Seattle, and it was called Yellow Fever. And yellow fever it's a racist and kind of a gay slur. So not a good idea.
Okay.
I have a client, I'm not going to say who they are, but they are naming a product right now, a name that I know as a gay slur, but they were unfamiliar with it as a gay slur.
Yeah.
And I looked it up on the Urban Dictionary, the bane of every namer, and it really didn't have that many votes on it. So that surprised me. So, that's the nice thing about the younger generation. Maybe they don't know some of these words that maybe an older have a negative connotation with, but it is always smart to do diligence and look things up. So, because, there's a coffee chain named Big B Coffee, and they had, I believe, 68 locations under their original name, which is incredibly racist here in San Diego where I grew up, and it was Beaners. And Beaners is like saying the N-word about a Mexican. It's really bad. And they knew that their name was bad. They knew. But you know what? They're like, oh, that's okay. We're in the Midwest. Not okay. And listen, people, listen up. Beaners did that years ago before everybody was on social media. You will be eviscerated on the internet. Oh my God, Whole Foods, when they partnered with Yellow Fever, one of the headlines, I think it was, or someone in the Washington Post said, come for the racism, stay for the disease. I mean, people, We've all seen people get eaten alive on the internet, so you want to be very careful.
Right. So you're trying to have fun. You're also memorable, and you're also trying to, what can we say? Make sure that you're doing due diligence.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But
So,
there's definitely, oh, go ahead.
So you're just trying to protect the brand name, I suppose, as well. So.
Well, protect yourself, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's important to protect your brand name and trademark it, but as far as the process, because I know you asked about that a while back, our process is we have a client complete a creative brief. Our entire brief is in my book. And then we spend a couple of weeks coming up with names, come back with a big fat list of names, then turn around, do it again, and then help them select the best name, the strongest name. If anyone wants to know, is their name good or bad? Where are the weak points? There's a strength test on our website, eatmywords.com. Just scroll down the page, you'll see this little strength meter, like arrow, boing, boing, back and forth, where you can test the strength of a name. And that is a 12 questions, and it will ask you questions. You know, is your name easy to spell or difficult to spell? Is your name difficult for people to pronounce? Is it memorable, meaning is it based in the familiar? So as you take the test and you ask yourself questions about your name, you'll see things that you might not have noticed just when you were in a hurry to come up with it. And you know that the internet graveyard is full of so many bad names of companies that have gone out of business by doing it wrong. My favorite one to point out, which is troublesome in so many areas, was it was a company spelled X-O-B-N-I. I'll let you guys write that down, X-O-B-N-I, and think about how you would pronounce that and what it means. That is pronounced Zobni. It was originally pronounced Zobni, but then they changed the pronunciation of it. And it's inbox spelled backwards. But how would you know that? So that's something where it's meaningful to, it has what I call the curse of knowledge. It's meaningful to the founders, but it's not meaningful to anybody else. And human beings don't spell things backwards. You can't look at something, like if I said, Jeff, spell your name backwards right now. I mean, you can spell your first name, but like the whole thing really fast. Like people don't intuitively mix things up. I have a namer friend who has dyslexia, and he does. He's got that gift where he can like move words, like put them in the word blender in his brain, but like I don't. So people don't spell things backwards. So yeah, Zobni, total train wreck. Another one, there's a company called Bot. Now, when I say bot, you can spell bot 3 ways. Well, 2 ways, really, right? Like a robot, like a little chat bot, or you bought something at the store. Mm-hmm. This company spelled it B-A-W-T-E. And and it was a shopping site that bought the farm, pardon the really cheesy pun. But yeah, how would you know that first of all, it was pronounced bot, or even what it was? Because people think it's bati. No one can ever pronounce it. So this is something to take away. Just because it's clever doesn't mean it's a good idea. So spelling it differently than it sounds doesn't mean it's a good idea. Yeah. Making it backwards, not a good idea. No. It's certainly interesting making names up. Now, the thing that I also think about is, especially in a global economy that we're in, is how do you allow for, I suppose, lost in translation type names? Like if you create a name in English, you must have some challenges, or you typically just work in the USA market typically. Are there some challenges with names like that don't end up being a good meaning in another country, like in a different language? Like, how do you handle that? Well, that's a good question. It happens far less than people think. I think when people are naming something, their biggest fear is, will it mean something dirty in French? And it usually doesn't. Although there was a toothpaste company that had a toothpaste that they named Cue, that ended up being the name of a notorious French porn magazine.
Right.
But there's language translation services just for naming firms that will do this, or that you can work with, that will run your name through all those languages. We work primarily in the States, or with people where English is the language that they want the name to be in, and so they want it to work more they're more willing to make people kind of adopt to the English way of saying, or the American English way of saying it, I suppose. One story that many of your listeners, I imagine, will have heard is the Chevy Nova story, which is this famous story. It's in business books, at business school. I've heard people tell this story over and over, and it's not true. And it's that when Chevy launched the Nova,
Mhm.
that in Mexico, or in Latin America, that Nova, people thought it meant won't go. Nova, won't go. So the car failed. Okay, total BS. Here's the story. Saying Nova meant won't go is the same as saying that I was launching a new, or naming a new dinette set Notable, right?
Mhm.
And that you thought that meant it had no table, right? You don't separate the words no table and notable. It's just notable. Same as with Nova. And also, really, you think that Chevrolet would have had the manuals made, the dealers in Mexico, all these people would have just not even thought to say, like, hey, wait a minute, Nova means won't go. No, that didn't happen. Nova meaning won't go, it was kind of this joke. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard Fiat stands for fix it again, Tony. It was like one of those, right? Like just a joke. And it just became legend, but it's just not true. And then what's crazy is if you read about it and it says, well, but after they changed the name from Nova to the Caribe, the sales skyrocketed. That's not true either. The Chevrolet didn't have a Caribe. The Caribe was a VW.
Right.
So like these stories just get told as like they're gospel, and they're not.
Yeah, so urban myths are overrated, frankly. So really go and check the actual veracity of all these. So, okay, so you said the place not to start is GoDaddy, and not because we think GoDaddy's not good, but in other words, don't use a domain name company to actually get the inspiration from. So where do you get the inspiration? Where would you go? I know you've talked about using Urban Dictionary to actually make sure that you're not making little faux pas and creating names that are going to be a problem. So where do you start?
So it depends what I'm naming, but okay, so let's say naming a frozen yogurt store, and this is examples in my book because everybody can relate to it because we all know what frozen yogurt is. So naming a frozen yogurt store, one thing I do is I would go to a stock image photo library or Google Images and just start typing in things that are cold. And then that would get me to winter sports. So I'd start looking at pictures of winter sports. And this particular one, by the way, that I named was in Utah, which is a big, very big on skiing and snowboarding. And then from there, I would like maybe look at a snowboarding, like, oh, I'm going to look up a glossary of terms of snowboarding terms. And then from there, I would see a name like chatter this happened to me. And like chatter is some innocuous snowboarding term. And like, oh, like I could see the kids at the frozen yogurt place chattering with each other, the teens, like that's kind of your teeth chatter. That could be a fun name. So that's one thing I would do. I was naming a men's athleisure, like men's sportswear brand for young guys. And the founder was really into martial arts. So I looked up action movies and I looked up top fight scenes in movies and top car chase scenes in movies. And that I just started reading to come up with ideas. And I saw stunt double and I'm like, that's the name, stunt double, such a good name. So that's how it happens. And Spoon Me, which is what the frozen yogurt store ended up being called, I just Googled eat frozen yogurt and I saw some spoons and that just popped into my head. But I do have a linear process for teaching people how to do this. But I'm not doing, a lot of people try to invent words by like adding a letter or like a bunch of letters and forcing things together, like, you know, yogurtology, like that's not a good name. So people don't know the rules, or they're copycats. Like Pinkberry is a very well-known frozen yogurt store here in the States. I think I've seen it overseas as well. And there, all these people copycat them. So there's like Blissberry, Yoberry, Loveberry. It's like I have this whole collection of berry yogurt names. Like, don't be a copycat. So try to be original, and metaphors are great. So if you're naming something fast, so think of running shoes, right? If, let's say the process for them was looking at images and they did an image search for fast, they might see some fast animals and see Puma, like boom, there's your name, Puma. So metaphors are my favorite kind of names. They work, and then clever names too.
Right. And so can you give us some examples maybe of clever names that you love?
Yeah, I love, well, so a clever name is like, we named a cupcake store the Church of Cupcakes, right? So it's fun, right?
Yep.
Like combining two things together that you wouldn't expect, church and cupcakes. And so with her, the founder, she calls herself the church lady. Her tagline that we did is worshipers welcome. And then she has really fun flavor names like Strawberry Sim. The vanilla cupcake is called the Missionary. So there's a lot of wink, wink, fun things going on. Jeff, you and I were introduced by Lynette Hoy. She used to just call her PR firm Lynette Hoy PR. And I said, let me rebrand you with a business name. So she's a very fiery woman, as you know. So I rebranded her Fire Talker PR with the tagline. Her original tagline we did was hot on the press, because she was on the press. Let me tell you, she was hot on the press. And so she calls herself the fire chief. She works in the firehouse. She has these great package names like Controlled Burn. So she really has fun with that name. She has a theme song so when she does speaking engagements, she like brings a big boom box and plays the Ohio Players singing fire. And so she gets a crowd on their feet dancing,
Right.
you know. So yeah, you can have fun with a name. That's a name with legs, what I call legs, when your name lends itself to a theme, like Fire Talker or the Church of Cupcakes or Eat My Words, my firm. Our blog is called The Kitchen Sink. That's a name with legs.
Right. Okay. Right. So, so there's much more to the name then, isn't there? Like a lot of people go, oh, it's a name, but you're actually saying, well, we can actually, well, you said a name with legs. You actually can take that into the whole product naming and packaging, and even for services, not just products themselves. So there's some services areas that you've done that are a bit of fun. In other words, you've named a services company, like you mentioned data analytics, which you said was, as we know, is a pretty boring area, essentially. So are there any areas in the, I suppose, digital services space that you've had fun with over the years?
Get digital services.
Software.
Well, every software, they don't like to have fun in software. No, the business to business people are pretty serious. I can't think of any in particular, but here's one. Okay, it's not digital services, but it's robotics. Okay.
Right, okay.
So this company, they were going to be called Bistro Robotics, and they make robotics for washing dishes. And it started out as a small idea. They actually came up with it standing outside of a restaurant. Like, what? Oh, the woman that founded it was one of the founders of Neato, which I named Neato Robotics years ago. And she was looking for her next venture. And so she's like, what if we made robotics for restaurants? So it started out small, so Bistro Robotics, but then they realized, like, hey, wait a minute, why don't we go service restaurants that wash lots of dishes? So then they made them for commercial kitchens in Vegas that were washing 10,000 dishes a day. So that name is, so when they would, it's really hard to explain robotics to anybody if you're not an engineer from MIT. And most people don't want to understand. Just like you don't want to understand how dry cleaning works. I just want to give you my clothes and have them come back without stains in them. Like that's the magic, right? So it's magic. So that's what it was. It was like, and when they would tell people, no, we're going to, because dishwashing is the most hated job in any restaurant, and dishwashers quit all the time. It's demeaning. They hate it. So this is really an amazing thing that they were building. And when they would ask me, how do you do that? You know, it's magic. So I came up with a name that was based on magic, and it's Dishcraft, which is like witchcraft, but a twist on that, Dishcraft. Right. So now they have the theme of magic. I'm not sure what they've done with it yet, but that's where they can take their name that lends itself to a theme and have fun with it.
Right. Yeah. So essentially the underlying, I suppose, part of what you're doing is actually just having fun with the name and make it memorable, certainly. So are you the challenges with, like, you're in a very niche business, and how do you scale yourself? Like, how do you find people to help you?
That's so easy. If you have a naming firm, everyone wants to work with you because they all fancy themselves to be good namers. So yeah, on our website, eatmywords.com, we have the Ultimate Naming Challenge, where people can try to submit some names for it's a fictitious product, and then they submit 20 names and they come to me, and then, you know, actually I don't see them. They go to 6 of our namers, and 5 out of 6 have to give it the thumbs up, and then if they all do, then I see them. Otherwise I would never get anything done. But yeah, so it's easy actually to find people, and I have people all over the place that work for me. I have Kaylin, she's my mama bear. She's in Japan right now, but her husband's in the military, so she's stationed there. I've got Ryan in Puerto Rico. I've got people all over the place. So yeah, it's like I said, whatever a client wants, if they're like naming something, they're naming some kind of beef product, I've got my guy Jeff in Texas. Like, he's going to be working on that.
Right. So you've tried to find experts in your area. Is that what you try and do?
They don't. No, I actually don't like to hire professional namers because they're all, like I said, they have the background in linguistics, and I don't want people that know linguistics. I want people that are good with words, that are good writers and creative. And it's funny. It's just like writing. You can write anything, like songwriters. I could never write a song. And a lot of copywriters, I was a copywriter, can't name things. You know, some people are good, some people aren't. So it's really a gift to be able to name and to come up with things that people can spell and pronounce, and that everybody understands when they see it. So, and I want to just talk for a minute about made up names, because people like to invent these words, right? So a good example of a made up name is Groupon or Pinterest. Those are good names because when I say Groupon or Pinterest, you know how to spell both of those. You understand what it is, right? Like, oh, coupons for groups, which is what it started out as. Or, oh, I pin my interest. So right. They're easy to spell, easy to pronounce, easy to understand, and they sound like real words. Yep. Now, the ones that don't work are when people try to force things together. Like the one that just kills me is a group of women professionals, and they call themselves femfessionals. Like, ew, like, really, would you want to put that on your LinkedIn resume, ladies? Another is like perfumeology. That tries too hard.
Yeah, okay, yep.
And then people are copy trends a lot. Like, you know, the word zen is overused. The word bright is overused. People overuse colors. And in my book, I have this whole section on copycats. And in the course I'm developing, I have this whole section on copycats are being trendy, like using like, you know, an LY in your name. Or also, by the way, I'm not a fan of using anything country codes in names, like .ly, which most people don't know, the LY is for Libya. And I didn't even know that, and I've been to Libya. So
Okay.
that was kind of a shocker. So yeah, I'd say stick with .com or .net. Those are the two really trusted ones.
Yeah, certainly most people try and get a .com name because it is trusted. It's seen as an international domain. And that's certainly when I was looking for, now my name is my website name. So obviously I didn't have to think too long and hard about coming up with a brand name for that. But I have a strange name. I used to get called all sorts of names in the schoolyard. Jeff Bullis was, bull ass, bullshit, bulldog. So I was actually able to get my domain name as a .com, which if I was briansmith.com, that would have been hard to get. But the reality is that jeffbullis.com wasn't hard to get because there's not many of us on the planet. So what was a problem as a kid in the schoolyard ended up being an asset in the digital world later. So, which I was rather thankful for, really. So it's, yeah. So your process is, don't worry about using domain name providers to actually go and think up a brand name. It's use metaphors. So what are the other parts of the process, just as a high view? You basically go and do a Google search. You make sure you're not making mistakes by using Urban Dictionary. So what's some of the other parts of the process that you take the client through?
This is really important. You don't want to ask everybody what they think of your name, because when you ask people, what do you like this name? That's not what they hear. What they hear is, what don't you like about this name, right? And when you ask somebody for their opinion, it's an invitation to criticize.
Yes.
So don't do that.
Okay.
I tell people, like, read my book or take my course or hire us, but the second you start asking people, you're opening up Pandora's box, and you will never get a name that everybody likes. And I just jumped off a call with a professor from Stanford and was naming something for her. And one of the names I came up with, she's like, yeah, I know someone with that name as a personal name, but also the name of a color. I know someone with that name and I don't like them. So, you're bringing in personal bias. So when you're reviewing names, the question to ask yourself is not, do I like it? The question to ask, is it right for the brand? Completely
Right.
different question.
Okay. And do you then bounce those ideas off your team as well when you're actually, or?
If someone's in, like, we were recently naming something that was targeted at young moms, and Katie, who works for me, is a young mom. So I'm not a young mom. So I said, hey, Katie, which of these appeal most to you? Because I knew as a professional namer, or professional working for me, she would understand what was a good name and what wasn't.
Right.
But clients are always going to have their favorites anyway. I mean, it's so hard to know. And sometimes there is no right answer,
No.
but it's more important to eliminate what has pitfalls, right? If it looks like a typo, scratch it off the list. If it's hard to pronounce, if it can be pronounced two different ways, that's a
Right.
problem.
Right. And you would have come across all these mistakes over the last 20 odd years anyway, wouldn't you? In terms of these sorts of and a lot of people, if they're not doing naming all the time, it would be really difficult for them to, I suppose, know where this possibly is going to be a big mistake, because once you start putting a big advertising budget behind a name, you want to make sure you get the things that really could cripple you, I suppose.
Right, but most people don't have money for advertising. So that's why I say your name needs to work really hard and be like a little ad. Like Neato, the robotic vacuum, or Retriever, the GPS for dogs. Those were both like little headlines. And the Church of Cupcakes, names that make people smile are infectious. And something that I would ask people to think about is that your name will get used more and last longer than any other investment you make in your business.
Right. Okay.
Think about your own personal name. How long have you had that, right? However old we are, that's how long. It's going to last a long time. So you want your name you want to put a lot of thought into it. don't just be in a hurry to get an available domain that's not going to work for you. It's better just to spend time on it. I mean, we spend weeks coming up with names sometimes. And then once you like really vet it, like I said, we have the free test on our site. You can run it through there and just think about these things that I've talked about. And then that's what you want to make sure your name is bulletproof.
Yep. That's a good point, because there's been some big mistakes over the years. I remember I was walking through, it was at Vancouver actually, and I came across, and I think I'd known you a couple of years at that stage, and I came across this name that I found almost unpronounceable. I think it was a fashion store or something, and I actually texted you, I think I said, and took a photo of the brand name and went, I don't even know how to pronounce this. And I went, and so we've had a lot of chats over the years regarding sort of fun names, bad names, good names, and I love some of what you've been doing. So Alexandra, I know you've got an important call coming up, so I just want to hold you up. It's been absolutely fun to actually hear some of your examples. It's great to see your smiling face again, and it's always great to catch up. And I look forward to sharing, this with my listeners. Now, are there any books that you find inspirational? Because obviously you love words. What are some books that you love that could maybe inspire people? Are there any that
a book that I love is called Indistractable by Neato. It's a New York Times bestseller. That's relatively new. He endorsed my book, so I always want to say something nice about his book, but it is a New York Times bestseller for a reason. Also, The Iconist by Jamie Mustard. That is also a winner of the Al marketing, sales and marketing books. And Near Eal's book also won an Al Award. So those are two books that I highly recommend, and they're relatively new and full of great content, actionable ideas.
Right. Okay. It's great to hear. For me, books certainly are one of my big inspiration pieces. Are there any mentors along the way that have helped you out? As in,
I've been inspired by a lot of people, but the biggest inspiration has always been my mom. She was, and still is, a lifelong feminist. She told me that I could be whatever I wanted to be. I was never held back. I was always encouraged, and she's still my biggest cheerleader, and that's helped me. I think if I had any doubt, I never would have said I could be a namer and just name things, or if I was ever doubted, she never doubted me. And that's how I was able to have the courage and just try it and do it.
Right. There's nothing like having that support, isn't it, to actually, that believes in you right from day one, and nothing like a good mum and dad and family that supports you. And obviously you've had that, and we sometimes don't understand until later in life when we start to appreciate whether you become a parent or not, but to actually understand that underlying support, giving you a safe place to thrive and grow, and it's worth gold. And I certainly have had a great mum and dad who valued education and supported me. And it's great to hear that mum's your go-to support and greatest fan. That's fantastic. Thanks, Alexandra, for sharing your ideas and insights. It's been great. I've learned a lot to do. I've actually read the book. So everyone, this is the book called Hello, My Name is Awesome. It's fantastic. It's not a big read.
This is the new cover. The new cover has a blue label on it, the second edition.
So if you see one with a red cover, don't buy it. It's an old one. If you see one with a blue highlight, that's the new one. So thanks, Alexandra.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Have a great evening, because it's heading towards evening in San Diego, and it's heading towards lunchtime here in Sydney. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Have a great day. Great to chat.
My pleasure. Bye, Jeff.
Bye.